In a mansion steeped in luxury, a 7-year-old boy screams in agony every night. While doctors rule out physical causes, a humble housekeeper notices signs that science insists on ignoring. And with a single action, she reveals a cruel secret hidden beneath the skin, proving that the truth doesn't always shine on a screen, but pulses in the touch of someone who dares to feel. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The dead of night hung heavy over the Upper East Side of Manhattan, where townhouses rose like fortresses of glass and concrete, protecting secrets that money was determined to hide. In the largest of them, a 3-story building with manicured gardens and an illuminated pool, the silence was shattered by a scream that jolted the staff awake. It was the boy, again. Gabriel was only 7, but his sunken eyes held a weariness that seemed to span a lifetime. That night, like so many others, he writhed in his king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, his small hands clutching his own head, as if trying to rip out something invisible that no one else could see. The crying was desperate, animalistic, a sound that cut to the soul of anyone who heard it. Michael Anderson, the boy's father and owner of one of the country's largest real estate development firms, rushed into the room. At 42, he was a man accustomed to solving any problem with a phone call or a signature on a contract. He built skyscrapers, negotiated with politicians, and moved millions as easily as he breathed. But faced with his son's agony, all his power dissolved into absolute helplessness. "Gabriel, son, what's happening? Tell me where it hurts, please." Michael begged, his voice cracking as he tried to hold the boy's little hands, which were frantically scratching his own scalp. The door opened and Vanessa entered with the impeccable posture she always maintained, even at 3 in the morning. She was Michael's second wife, a stunning 35-year-old woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a flawless manicure. She wore a pearl-colored silk robe that cost more than many people make in a month. Her face showed no trace of genuine concern, only a mask of calculated efficiency. "Michael, you need to calm down. It only gets worse when you're nervous," she said in a controlled voice, approaching the bed. "Gabriel, sweetie, let's put on your beanie. You know you feel better with it on." "I don't want it," the boy whimpered between sobs. "It hurts, Vanessa. It hurts so much." Vanessa ignored his protest and fitted a thick navy blue wool beanie over the child's head, which Gabriel had worn day and night since the episodes began months ago. The boy flinched at her touch, but gradually calmed down, more from exhaustion than any real relief. "I'll get his sedative," Vanessa announced, leaving the room with decisive steps. Michael remained there, sitting on the edge of the bed, holding his son's small hand as it finally began to relax. He looked at the pale little face, the dark circles under his eyes, the chapped lips. How had it come to this? How had his only son, the child who should have been running through the garden, playing catch, going to school, turned into this fragile, drugged little being? It all started 6 months after he married Vanessa. Gabriel, who had once been a lively, smiling child, began complaining of constant headaches. At first, Michael thought they were just tantrums for attention, the boy's way of reacting to the new family dynamic. Gabriel's biological mother, Lucy, had left when the boy was only 3, unable to cope with the loneliness of a marriage where her husband lived more at the office than at home. She tried to take their son, but Michael used all his power and influence to maintain custody. Lucy gave up, moved to upstate New York, and was never heard from again. Gabriel grew up without a mother, raised by nannies and housekeepers until Vanessa entered the picture. She had appeared at a charity gala, beautiful, elegant, and full of attention for Michael and especially for Gabriel. The boy, starved for maternal affection, clung to her immediately. Within 6 months, they were married. Vanessa took over the household with an iron fist, firing old staff, hiring new ones, and reorganizing everything. Gabriel called her Vanessa, a name she herself suggested, saying stepmom sounded too cold. But then the pain began. At first, the episodes were sporadic. Gabriel would complain, take some children's pain reliever, and be fine. Then the episodes became more frequent and intense. Vanessa insisted on taking him to the best doctors in New York. Neurologists, pediatricians, child psychiatrists, blood tests, MRIs, CT scans, all came back perfect. Nothing explained the episodes. The medical consensus was unanimous and devastating for Michael: psychosomatic disorder. Gabriel was somatizing emotional trauma, possibly related to his mother's abandonment and the difficulty of adjusting to the new family. The recommended treatment included therapy, prescription medication, and above all, a structured routine. Vanessa embraced the diagnosis with an almost obsessive dedication. She personally took over all of her stepson's care, from his medication to his baths, from his meals to his sleep schedule. Michael, drowning in the guilt of having driven away his son's biological mother and of never having been a present father, completely entrusted Gabriel to Vanessa's care. After all, she was devoted, attentive, and followed every medical recommendation to the letter. If anyone could help Gabriel, it was her. Vanessa returned with a glass of water and a small blue pill. Michael watched as she helped the boy swallow the medicine. Within minutes, Gabriel slipped into a deep, heavy sleep. "You need to rest, Michael. You have that important meeting with the Chinese investors tomorrow," Vanessa reminded him, lightly touching her husband's shoulder. "How am I supposed to work, knowing my son is like this? The doctors said it's a phase, he'll get better, but you need to stay strong. Gabriel needs a stable father, not someone who falls apart at every crisis." Vanessa's words always made sense, always. She had a rational way of looking at situations that somehow calmed Michael. He sighed, kissed his sleeping son's forehead, and left the room. From the dark hallway of the second floor, someone watched everything in silence. Eleanor was 48, with sun-weathered skin, her black hair tied in a simple bun. She wore the grey housekeeper's uniform and held a cleaning rag in her calloused hands. She was the newest hire in the house, brought on 3 weeks ago for cleaning and night watch duties. Elena came from a small village on the Navajo Nation reservation in Arizona. She had migrated to New York at 20, worked in dozens of family homes, and learned to be invisible in the world of the rich, to lower her head and do her job without question. But she carried within her a knowledge that no university could teach. Her grandmother was a medicine woman, a respected healer throughout the region. From a young age, Eleanor learned to read the signs of the body, to identify illnesses by smell, by skin color, by the type of sweat. She knew that the body speaks in ways that medical scans cannot capture. And that night, watching Gabriel in crisis, Eleanor saw signs that no one else seemed to notice. The boy's sweat wasn't normal, it was cold and clammy. His pallor wasn't just from fatigue, it was something deeper. And most importantly, the way he always scratched the same spot on his head with growing desperation, as if something there was physically tormenting him. Elena knew that kind of pain. She had seen it in her village, cases of children with severe reactions to poisonous plants, insect bites, or infections that started small and then exploded in agony. This wasn't in his mind. It was in his body. She was sure of it. But who would believe her? An indigenous housekeeper with no degree, no academic training, contradicting renowned doctors. Eleanor knew her place in that house. She knew she had to be careful. In the following days, she watched, discreetly, always present in the shadows, doing her work while keeping her eyes sharp. She noticed that Gabriel never, under any circumstances, took off the beanie. Not to sleep, not to eat, not even in the rare moments he played alone in his room. Only during his bath, and even then, only Vanessa was allowed to be present. The bathroom door was locked, and from inside came muffled screams that his stepmother explained as a fear of water. Eleanor also noticed that the episodes seemed to follow a pattern. They were always more intense after Vanessa adjusted the beanie, always after she had spent a few minutes alone with the boy. And Gabriel, even as a child, showed a silent fear of his stepmother. It wasn't obvious, but it was there, in the way he flinched when she approached, in the way his eyes dropped when she spoke. One afternoon, Eleanor was cleaning the second-floor hallway when she heard voices coming from Gabriel's room. The door was ajar. Vanessa was on the phone, her voice low but firm. "Yes, doctor, he's still having the episodes. I know the tests don't show anything, but I trust your diagnosis. Psychosomatic disorder, yes. I'll increase the sedative dosage as you recommended." My husband is at his wit's end, I think. He's finally considering admitting the boy to a specialized clinic. It would be for the best, don't you think? A controlled environment, away from external stimuli. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Admitted? A 7-year-old boy in a psychiatric clinic? Something was deeply wrong. She didn't understand modern medicine, but she understood people. And something about Vanessa didn't add up, didn't fit. It was too calculated, too cold, even for the standards of Manhattan's elite. That night, Elena did something she had never done in her entire life as a housekeeper. She waited for everyone to fall asleep and went to Gabriel's room. The door was ajar. She pushed it open slowly, stepping into the darkness. The boy was sleeping deeply, sedated. Elena approached the bed, knelt beside it, and just watched. In the silence of the early morning, she prayed softly in her native language, asking the ancestral spirits for clarity, asking for the strength to do what was right. She looked at Gabriel's pale face, at the blue beanie covering his head, and felt an absolute certainty grow within her. This boy was being tortured, not by spirits, not by emotional trauma, but by something very real, very physical, and far crueler than anyone imagined. And she, Elena, a simple housekeeper invisible to the eyes of this world of luxury, might be the only person who could save him. But to do that, she would have to break all the rules. She would have to challenge the established order. She would have to risk her job, her reputation, maybe even her safety. Was it worth it? Elena looked once more at Gabriel's suffering face and knew the answer. Yes, it would always be worth it. She left the room in silence, but with a determination she hadn't felt in years. The truth was hidden under that beanie, and she was going to find it no matter the cost. The following days brought a routine of silent surveillance. Elena quickly learned the schedules of everyone in the townhouse, Vanessa's movements, Michael's appointments, the moments when Gabriel was left alone, drugged and quiet in his room. She cleaned, cooked, organized, always with watchful eyes, always with her ears pricked. The house ran like a well-oiled machine. Vanessa controlled everything with military precision. Gabriel's medication, his special meals, access to the boy. There was a list of rules posted on the kitchen refrigerator that all staff had to follow. Do not enter Gabriel's room without permission. Do not touch the boy's head under any circumstances. Do not offer food outside the nutritionist-approved menu. Do not make noise in the hallways during rest periods. Do not question medical decisions. Elena read those rules every morning and felt a tightness in her chest. She knew wealthy families, had worked in luxurious homes before, but she had never seen a child so isolated, so controlled, so deprived of any spontaneity. Gabriel no longer went to school since the episodes had intensified. He had a private tutor 3 times a week who came to the house, but even those lessons happened with the boy visibly drowsy, unable to concentrate. It was a cloudy Wednesday when Elena witnessed a scene that confirmed her darkest suspicions. She was in the backyard garden hanging clothes on the line when she heard Vanessa's voice coming from the indoor pool area. The stepmother was on her cell phone, pacing back and forth with that elegant, calculated stride. "Of course I know the tests are normal, doctor," Vanessa said with restrained irritation, "but my stepson continues to suffer. The medications aren't working. Maybe it's time to consider something stronger, something that will really calm him down." A pause. "Yes, I understand the risks. But look, a child living in this constant state of agitation is also at risk, isn't he?" A longer pause. "Excellent. Yes, I trust your professional judgment. You can email me the new prescription. My husband will sign whatever is necessary." Elena pretended to be busy with the laundry, but every word pierced her conscience like a needle. Vanessa wanted to increase the medication even more. For what? To keep the boy in what state? This wasn't care. It was containment. It was imprisoning a child in his own body. That afternoon, Michael came home early from the office. Eleanor saw him rush in, his tie loosened, his face tense. He went straight to Gabriel's room. Vanessa was there, as always, fluffing the pillows for the deeply sleeping boy. "I need to talk to you," Michael said, his voice heavy with anguish. "Downstairs." They went down to the study. and Elena, who was cleaning the foyer, could hear fragments of the conversation through the partially open door. "I can't stand seeing my son like this anymore. Vanessa, he's getting worse, thinner, paler, more distant every day. The medicine isn't working. Maybe we need to get a second opinion, other specialists. Michael, we've already consulted the best doctors in New York. They all reached the same conclusion. Gabriel has a severe psychosomatic disorder. He needs time, controlled medication, a stable environment. Your questioning the treatment only makes everything worse. What if that's not it? What if the doctors are wrong? Doctors with 40 years of experience, with impeccable resumes, are going to be wrong? Michael, you need to trust the process. I know it's hard. I suffer seeing Gabriel like this too. But casting doubt on the treatment won't help anyone." There was a heavy silence. Eleanor imagined Michael, that powerful and decisive man in business, completely defeated by a situation he couldn't control. His voice came out lower, almost broken. "I just want my son to be happy. I want him to smile again. And he will, honey. But you have to be patient, and you need to stop blaming yourself for what happened with his biological mother. Gabriel is in good hands now." Eleanor felt a surge of anger. That woman manipulated everything with mastery, using Michael's guilt as a tool, turning his every doubt into a weakness. And worst of all, he believed her. He believed because he wanted to believe, because it was easier than facing the possibility that something much more sinister was happening under his own roof. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in the small studio apartment she occupied in the house's annex, staring at the ceiling, thinking. She had to act, but how? If she spoke directly to Michael, he probably wouldn't believe her. After all, who was she? A housekeeper hired a few weeks ago with no credentials, no proof. Vanessa had already built a solid narrative, supported by renowned doctors and complex tests. But Eleanor had something the doctors didn't. She had eyes trained by generations of healers. She had an intuition sharpened by years of human observation. And above all, she had a heart that couldn't ignore a child's suffering. The next morning, a Friday, the opportunity arose. Vanessa had an unavoidable appointment, a meeting with the interior designer who was renovating the west wing of the townhouse. She gave Elena strict instructions before leaving. "Gabriel took his sedative an hour ago. He'll sleep until noon. Do not go into his room. If he wakes up and calls for you, call me immediately. Do not touch him. I'm serious, Elena. No picking him up, no trying to comfort him. The doctors were clear about maintaining emotional distance." "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied, lowering her eyes submissively. As soon as Vanessa drove off in her white Mercedes, Elena's heart began to race. Michael was in a video conference in his study that would last at least 3 hours, according to what he had mentioned at breakfast. The other 2 staff members, the cook and the gardener, were busy in their areas. It was now or never. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. She reached the door to Gabriel's room and paused, her hand on the knob, her heart beating so loudly it seemed to echo through the empty hallways. She took a deep breath, asked her ancestors for protection, and opened the door. The room was enormous, decorated in shades of blue and white, with expensive furniture and untouched toys on the shelves. Gabriel slept in the center of the king-size bed, so small in that vast space, so fragile, under the thick comforter. The blue beanie was there, as always, covering his head. Elena approached slowly with the care of someone approaching a wounded animal. She knelt beside the bed and just watched. The boy was breathing heavily, his mouth slightly open, the dark circles stark against his childish face. His little hands were clenched into fists, even in sleep, as if he were in constant tension. Slowly, very slowly, Elena reached out and lightly touched Gabriel's arm. His skin was cold and damp. She slid her fingers to his wrist, feeling the rapid, irregular pulse. Then she touched his forehead, pushing aside a few strands of hair peeking out from under the beanie. It was hot there, very hot, while the rest of his body was cold, a localized fever. Gabriel stirred a little, murmuring something incomprehensible, but didn't wake up. Elena looked at the beanie. It was thick, made of wool, completely inappropriate for the New York climate, even in winter. Why would a child wear something like that all the time? Why was only the stepmother allowed to remove it? Elena knew she was about to cross a dangerous line. If Vanessa found out, she would be fired on the spot, maybe even accused of something worse. But she looked again at Gabriel's suffering face and knew she had no choice. With extreme care, she began to lift the edge of the beanie. Gabriel squirmed a little, moaning softly, but the sedative was strong enough to keep him on the surface of sleep. Elena lifted it a little more, exposing his forehead, his ears, the beginning of his scalp, and then she saw it. On his right temple, just above the ear, was a reddish, swollen area. It wasn't just a simple irritation, it was a serious inflammation. The skin shiny, stretched, visibly painful. Elena leaned closer, examining it better. There were small scabs around it, as if something had been there repeatedly, causing wounds that tried to heal but were constantly reopened. She lightly touched the area. Gabriel woke up with a scream. "No, no, please, no," the boy whimpered, still half unconscious, his hands instinctively going to his head. Elena held his little hands firmly but gently. "Gabriel, my boy, calm down. It's me, Auntie Eleanor. I'm not going to hurt you. I promise." Gabriel's eyes slowly opened, confused, frightened. He looked at Eleanor as if trying to understand where he was, who this woman was. "It hurts," he whispered, his voice thin. "It hurts a lot, Auntie." "I know, sweetie, I know. But I'm going to help you, okay? I just need to look at your head properly." "You can't. Vanessa said no one can touch it. She gets mad." The boy began to tremble, not from pain but from fear. Elena felt a mixture of anger and compassion that almost suffocated her. This child was terrified, not of doctors, not of pain, but of his own stepmother. She held Gabriel's face between her calloused hands. "Gabriel, look at me. Do you trust Auntie Eleanor?" The boy hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Then let me see your head, just to see. I won't pull anything, I won't hurt you. I just need to understand what's happening. You're a brave boy, aren't you?" Gabriel thought for a moment, then nodded again. Elena removed the beanie completely, and what she saw made her stifle a gasp of horror. The inflammation was much worse than she had imagined. There were multiple reddish areas, not just one, and in each of them, when she looked more closely, there seemed to be something under the skin, something that shouldn't be there. With decades of experience dealing with wounds and illnesses, Eleanor recognized the signs. This wasn't just an irritation or an allergy. It was a reaction to something external, something being repeatedly introduced into the child's skin. She had seen something similar in her village, when children played with stinging plants or when poisonous thorns got stuck under the skin. "Gabriel, when Vanessa puts the beanie on you, does she press it hard?" "She does," the boy replied, his eyes welling up. "She says it's to make me better, but it hurts more afterward." Elena felt the pieces of the puzzle click into place in her mind. The beanie wasn't protection, it was part of the problem. But what was in the beanie? What was Vanessa doing? At that moment, they heard the sound of a car pulling into the garage. Vanessa was back early. Elena acted on pure instinct. She quickly put the beanie back on Gabriel, straightened the blankets, grabbed a children's book from the shelf, and sat in the armchair next to the bed. When Vanessa opened the door, she found Elena calmly reading to Gabriel, who seemed relaxed. For a second, Vanessa's mask of control slipped, revealing something cold and calculating in her eyes. "What are you doing in here?" Her voice was low, but laced with threat. "The boy woke up calling out," Eleanor lied, keeping her voice steady. "I thought he was having an episode, but he was just thirsty. I gave him some water and started reading to calm him down." Vanessa approached the bed, examining Gabriel from head to toe, checking that the beanie was in place, that everything was as she had left it. "You were instructed to call me if he woke up." "I tried, ma'am, but you didn't answer." It was true. Vanessa checked her phone and saw 2 missed calls from Elena. Her face hardened even more. "Next time, keep trying until I answer. Now you can leave. I'll take it from here." Elena stood up, but before she left, she looked at Gabriel and gave him an encouraging smile. The boy returned a small, shy, but genuine smile. It was the first time Elena had seen him smile since she had arrived at the house. Vanessa noticed the exchange of glances, and something in her hardened further. As Elena closed the door, she pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, watching Gabriel with a disturbing intensity. The boy shrank back, his smile vanishing instantly. Outside, in the hallway, Elena leaned against the wall, trembling. She had just discovered something that would change everything. Gabriel was being deliberately harmed, and Vanessa was responsible. But how could she prove it? How could she make anyone believe her without concrete evidence? Elena knew she needed help. She needed someone with power in that house, someone who could challenge Vanessa. And there was only one person who fit that description, even if he didn't know it yet. Michael Anderson needed to see what she had seen. He needed to wake up from the trance Vanessa had put him in. But convincing a rich, proud man drowning in guilt to distrust his own wife would not be easy. Elena would have to be smart, strategic, and above all brave enough to risk everything for a child she barely knew. As she walked back down the stairs to her duties, a certainty grew in her chest. The war had begun, and she had no intention of losing. The weekend arrived, bringing a nearly palpable tension to the Anderson townhouse. Michael spent Saturday locked in his study, immersed in financial reports he could barely read, his mind constantly drifting back to Gabriel. Vanessa was more vigilant than ever, practically never leaving her stepson's side, as if sensing some invisible threat. Elena maintained her routine, but every move was calculated. She watched, took mental notes, and looked for an opening. She knew she had aroused Vanessa's suspicion, and that any misstep could cost her not only her job, but perhaps Gabriel's only chance of being saved. On Sunday afternoon, while Elena was watering the plants on the terrace, she heard Vanessa on the phone again. She was in the study, the door ajar, her voice low but audible. "Yes, Mom. I know it's taking longer than we planned." Her voice had an irritated edge Elena had never heard before. "But I need to be sure it's going to work. I can't leave any traces. The doctors are already starting to suggest inpatient care, which would be perfect, but Michael is still resisting." A pause. "Don't worry. In the end, everything will be as it should be. The inheritance will be ours." Elena felt her blood run cold. Inheritance? Was Vanessa talking about an inheritance? About Gabriel? The pieces finally snapped together with crystalline, terrifying clarity. Vanessa wasn't just neglecting Gabriel. She was systematically destroying his health, making him unbearable so he would be sent away, institutionalized, removed from the path to the fortune. Gabriel was Michael's sole heir. If something happened to him, or if he were declared incompetent, unfit, the family fortune would be left to Michael alone, and with Vanessa as his wife, eventually everything would be hers. Elena had to lean against the doorframe, the weight of this revelation nearly knocking her over. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a calculated, methodical, devastating plan. And the most frightening part was Vanessa's patience. She was willing to torture a child for months, maybe years, to get what she wanted. That night, Elena made a decision. She had to talk to Michael, but not just any way. She needed proof. She needed something concrete that would force him to open his eyes. On Monday, Vanessa had to leave for a doctor's appointment of her own, a Botox session she couldn't reschedule. Before she left, as always, she drugged Gabriel with a strong sedative and left strict instructions for Elena not to go near the boy. But this time Elena was prepared. As soon as Vanessa's car disappeared down the avenue, she grabbed her old smartphone and went up to Gabriel's room. The boy was sleeping soundly. With trembling hands, Elena carefully removed the beanie. The inflammation had worsened. It was redder, more swollen. Elena took pictures from every angle, the morning sunlight revealing every detail of the injured skin. Then, with a courage she didn't know she possessed, she took the beanie and examined it minutely. That's when she felt it. On the inside of the beanie, strategically placed, were tiny hardpoints almost imperceptible to a casual touch. Elena turned the beanie inside out and saw them. They were tiny plant fibers, minuscule spines sewn into the fabric, so small they seemed like just part of the wool's texture. But when pressed against the skin, especially for hours, days, weeks on end, they would cause exactly the kind of inflammation Gabriel had. Elena recognized that type of spine. It was from a desert plant known to her people, notorious for causing severe skin reactions, unbearable itching, and intense pain. In her village, it was used in rites of passage for its ability to cause extreme discomfort without leaving obvious marks. Someone who knew plants, who had access to this kind of material, could easily create a silent weapon of torture. She photographed the beanie, filming the tiny spines in detail. Then she put everything back in place and left the room, her heart pounding like a war drum. Michael arrived from the office at 6 in the evening, tired as always. Elena approached him in the foyer before he could go upstairs. "Mr. Anderson, I need to speak with you. It's about Gabriel. It's urgent." Michael stopped, surprised. The staff rarely approached him directly. "Elena, if this is about work, you can speak with Vanessa. I'm very tired today." "It's not about work, sir. It's about your son's health. There's something you need to see." The tone of Elena's voice, firm yet respectful, caught his attention. Michael watched her for a moment, noticing for the first time the determination in her dark eyes. "All right. Let's go to my study." Once inside, with the door closed, Elena took a deep breath. "Sir, what I'm about to show you will be hard to believe, but I need you to see it with your own eyes before you make any decisions." She opened her phone and showed him the pictures of Gabriel's head. Michael turned pale. "What is this? How did you get these pictures? Did you touch my son?" "Yes, sir. I did, because I needed to be sure of what I was seeing. Your son doesn't have a psychosomatic disorder. He has real wounds, caused by something very concrete." She then showed him the pictures of the beanie, explaining about the spines, about the desert plant, about how it would cause the exact symptoms Gabriel was showing. Stabbing pain, inflammation, episodes that seemed like nervous attacks but were simply the body's reaction to constant aggression. Michael stared at the images in absolute silence, his face cycling through a succession of emotions: disbelief, horror, anger, despair. This doesn't make any sense. Why would Vanessa do something like this? She takes care of Gabriel as if he were her own son. "Mr. Anderson," Eleanor's voice was soft but firm. "With all due respect, ask yourself why someone would care for a child while systematically hurting him. Ask yourself who would benefit if Gabriel were considered. Too sick to live at home, to inherit, to exist as an heir." Michael stared at her, the pieces finally falling into place. "Are you saying my wife is torturing my son for money? I'm saying someone is deliberately hurting Gabriel, and that person has unrestricted access to him, controls his medication, controls who can and cannot touch him, and is the only one who adjusts that beanie every day." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael collapsed into his chair, his face in his hands, breathing heavily. Eleanor felt sorry for him, but she couldn't let compassion get in the way. "Sir, there's one more thing. Today I heard Mrs. Anderson on the phone talking about an inheritance, about plans, about having Gabriel institutionalized. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated conversation." Michael looked up, and in his eyes was a resolve Elena hadn't seen before. "Where is the beanie now?" "In Gabriel's room, sir." "Let's go, now." They went upstairs together. Gabriel was still asleep, the effect of the sedative keeping him in a deep slumber. Michael approached the bed, looking at his son as if seeing him for the first time in months. He touched the pale little face, tears finally escaping. "I'm sorry, my son. I'm sorry I didn't see. For not protecting you." With trembling hands, he removed the beanie. The wounds were there, red, swollen, obvious now that he knew what to look for. Michael examined the beanie, felt the tiny spines, and understood the monstrosity of what had been done to his only child. Just then, they heard the sound of Vanessa's car arriving. Michael looked at Elena. "Don't say anything. Act normal. I'll handle this." Eleanor nodded and left the room. Michael put the beanie back on Gabriel and sat there, beside the bed, waiting. Vanessa entered the room a few minutes later, surprised to find her husband there. "Michael, did something happen?" "No. I just wanted to spend some time with him. I missed my son today." Vanessa assessed the situation, looking for warning signs, but Michael was a seasoned businessman, used to high-stakes negotiations. He knew how to hide his emotions when necessary. "All right, but don't be too long. Gabriel needs his rest," she said. giving her husband a cold kiss on the forehead before leaving. As soon as she was gone, Michael picked up his phone and made a call. "Hello, Dr. Riley, it's Michael Anderson. I need you to come to my house now. It's urgent. Bring your examination kit and come alone. I don't want anyone to know." Dr. Mark Riley was a personal friend of Michael's from college, a renowned dermatologist who had treated the family a few times. If anyone could confirm Elena's suspicions, it was him. While waiting for the doctor, Michael went downstairs and found Vanessa in the living room, drinking wine and scrolling through social media feeds. "Honey, I'm having a meeting here at the house in a little while." "Work stuff. Could you stay in our room? I need some privacy." Vanessa frowned, suspicious. "A work meeting at home on a Sunday night?" "It's an emergency. Chinese investor. Different time zone. You know how it is." She didn't seem convinced, but nodded. "Fine, but don't be long. I have to give Gabriel his nightly medication." Michael felt a wave of nausea at her words. Nightly medication. More sedatives. More ways to keep his son drugged and unable to complain or defend himself. Dr. Riley arrived 40 minutes later, carrying a medical bag. Michael led him straight to Gabriel's room. The doctor, a man in his 50s with graying hair and thick-rimmed glasses, examined the still-sleeping boy with quiet professionalism. When Michael removed the beanie and explained the situation, showing him Elena's photos and the beanie itself with the spines, Dr. Riley's face hardened. "Michael, this is very serious. If what you're telling me is true, we're talking about deliberate assault on a child." "I know. That's why I need you to examine him, document everything, give me an official report. I need undeniable proof." The doctor worked for over an hour, photographing the wounds with professional equipment, collecting tissue samples from the inflamed areas, examining the beanie with a magnifying glass and tweezers, and isolating the spines in small plastic bags for lab analysis. "This is from a desert plant," he confirmed, "known for causing severe dermal reactions. The spines were deliberately inserted into the fabric of the beanie. The wounds on Gabriel's head are consistent with prolonged and repeated exposure. I'd say this has been going on for months. Can it be reversed? Can my son be cured? The wounds will heal once we remove the source of irritation. Gabriel will need anti-inflammatory treatment, antibiotics to prevent infection, and probably psychological counseling to deal with the trauma. But yes, he will make a full recovery." Michael felt a relief so profound he almost collapsed. His son was going to be okay. He was going to survive. He was going to have a normal life. "I need everything documented, doctor. Every detail. I'm going to have to take this to the authorities." "I'm already on it. I'll send the samples to the lab tomorrow morning. We'll have full results in 48 hours. But Michael, you need to understand the gravity of this. If your wife is truly responsible, she has committed an act of extreme cruelty. The consequences will be devastating." "I know, and she will answer for every second of pain she caused my son." Dr. Riley finished his examination and left discreetly through the back door to avoid running into Vanessa. Michael stayed there beside Gabriel, planning his next steps. Vanessa appeared at the bedroom door a few minutes later. "Is the meeting over?" "It's over." She approached with the tray of nightly medication. Michael intercepted her. "Not tonight. Gabriel has slept enough. He needs to rest without drugs." "Michael, you know the doctors recommend it." "And I'm saying not tonight," he repeated, his voice firm, authoritative, leaving no room for argument. Vanessa stared at him, trying to understand the change in his behavior. For a moment, her eyes revealed something cold, calculating, almost reptilian. But she controlled herself, forcing a smile. "All right. You're the father. You decide." She left the room, but Michael knew he had raised her suspicions. Vanessa was smart, manipulative. She would realize something had changed, and when she did, she could become even more dangerous. Michael stayed up all night, sitting in an armchair beside Gabriel's bed, protecting his son for the first time in a long time. Outside the door, Elena also kept watch, sitting in the hallway, ready to intervene if necessary. The war had been declared, and Gabriel's fate would depend on the next few hours. The morning brought an intense brightness that flooded Gabriel's room. The boy opened his eyes slowly, confused, and the first thing he saw was his father's face, watching him with a tenderness he hadn't seen in a very long time. "Dad?" His voice came out hoarse, weak. "I'm here, son, I'm here, and I'm not leaving your side again." Gabriel tried to sit up, but Michael helped him gently. The boy's hand went to his head, searching for the beanie, but it wasn't there. He panicked. "My beanie, Dad. Vanessa said I always have to wear it." "You don't need it anymore, Gabriel. You'll never have to wear that beanie again." "But she'll be mad. She always gets mad when I take it off." Michael felt a pang of guilt so sharp he had to take a deep breath to keep from breaking down. He held his son's face in his hands. "No one is going to be mad at you for anything. Anymore. No one is going to hurt you anymore, Dad promises." Gabriel looked at him with those big frightened eyes, wanting to believe but afraid to hope. "It hurts less today," he said, lightly touching his own head. "Why does it hurt less?" "Because you're getting better, and you're going to get better every single day." At that moment, Vanessa opened the bedroom door. She stopped short at the sight of father and son together, Gabriel without his beanie, Michael with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Good morning, what's going on in here?" Michael stood up, protectively placing himself between Vanessa and Gabriel. "Sit down, Vanessa, we need to talk." Something in his tone made her hesitate. She looked at Gabriel, at the beanie tossed on the dresser, then back at Michael. "Talk about what?" "About what you've been doing to my son." The air in the room grew thick. Vanessa maintained a neutral expression, but Michael, who had negotiated with seasoned executives for decades, recognized the micro-tension in her shoulders, the almost imperceptible way her fingers clenched. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've been taking care of Gabriel as if he were my own son." "Care?" Michael picked up the beanie and threw it at her feet. "Is this care? Sewing poisonous spines inside a beanie and forcing a child to wear it for months? Is this care?" Vanessa turned pale but kept her composure. "You're insane. Spines? That's absurd. The doctors confirmed Gabriel has a psychosomatic disorder. The doctors were deceived by you. You manipulated the symptoms, controlled access, drugged my son until he couldn't even explain what he was feeling. But it's over, Vanessa. A specialist examined Gabriel yesterday. He documented everything, the wounds, the spines, the origin of the plant. We have concrete proof." Vanessa was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had lost all its artificial sweetness. "You have no idea what you're doing, Michael. You're going to destroy this family." "This family was already destroyed the moment you decided to torture an innocent child for greed." "Greed? I gave you the best years of my life. I took care of this house, this boy, you. And what did I get in return? Nothing. No security, no guarantees. Everything in his name." Her voice dripped with disdain as she pointed at Gabriel, a spoiled brat who isn't even capable of being grateful. Gabriel began to cry softly. Michael turned and hugged his son, shielding him from seeing this horrible transformation of the woman he called Vanessa. "You're leaving this house now," Michael said, his voice controlled but firm. "I'm giving you 30 minutes to pack your things. After that, my security will escort you out. And tomorrow, as soon as the medical reports are ready, I'm going to the police." Vanessa let out a bitter laugh. "The police? You think it's going to be that simple? I'm your wife, Michael. I have rights, I have lawyers, and more. Importantly, I have influence. You'll spend years trying to incriminate me. Maybe. But every day you spend trying to defend yourself is another day Gabriel will be safe, away from you. And that alone is worth everything." Vanessa's mask finally fell completely. "You're going to regret this. I'll destroy your reputation. I'll tell everyone you're a negligent father who let his son suffer for months without doing a thing. Tell them. Tell whoever you want. But also tell them about the spines you sewed inside a beanie. Tell them about the desert plant you used to torture a 7-year-old. Tell them about the phone calls where you plan to have my son institutionalized to get the inheritance, because all of that is documented now." Vanessa realized she had lost. She looked one last time at Gabriel, who was hiding in his father's embrace, and something that might have been regret flickered in her eyes before vanishing. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door. Michael held Gabriel for a long time, letting his son cry, letting himself cry too. Years of guilt, of absence, of blindness crashed down on him like an avalanche. But now he had a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. Elena appeared at the bedroom door, hesitant. "Mr. Anderson, Mrs. Anderson is packing her bags. Should I call security?" "Please, Elena, and after that, if you could, please prepare a calming tea for Gabriel, one of the ones you know with your herbs." Elena smiled, relieved. "Yes, sir. I'll prepare something special." As Elena went down to the kitchen, Michael sat on the bed with Gabriel in his lap, rocking him like he hadn't since he was a baby. The boy, emotionally exhausted, eventually fell asleep right there, but this time it was a peaceful sleep, without moans, without pain twitches. Vanessa left the townhouse an hour later, escorted by security into a discreet car. There were no shouts, no scene, just the heavy silence of an inevitable defeat. Michael watched from the window, making sure she was truly gone. In the following days, the household routine changed completely. Dr. Riley returned several times, bringing specialists in dermatology and infectious diseases to care for Gabriel's wounds. The lab analyses confirmed everything Elena had suspected. The spines were from a plant traditionally used in southwestern indigenous rituals. Vanessa had connections to a supplier of exotic plants, all documented in emails and bank transfers that the police discovered during their investigation. Gabriel began intensive treatment. The wounds were cleaned, medicated, and properly protected. For the first time in months, he could sleep without pain. And for the first time in his life, he had his father present, attentive and loving. Michael cancelled meetings, postponed trips, and completely reorganized his schedule. He spent hours playing with Gabriel, reading to him, simply being there. He discovered he had a funny, intelligent, curious son, qualities that had been hidden under layers of pain and medication. Elena remained at the house, but she was no longer just an employee. Michael recognized that she had saved Gabriel when everyone else, including himself, had failed. He offered her a position of trust as Gabriel's official caregiver, with a dignified salary and well-deserved respect. "You saw what no one else saw," Michael said one afternoon, having coffee with Elena in the kitchen while Gabriel drew in the living room. "How did you know?" Elena thought for a moment. "I come from a people who learn to listen to what the body says, sir. My grandmother always said that modern medicine is powerful, but sometimes it forgets that we are more than numbers on a test. We are flesh, blood, spirit. Gabriel was screaming for help with every episode, with every frightened look. He just needed someone willing to truly see." Michael nodded, emotional. "I failed him. I was an absent father. I let a stranger come in and nearly destroy my son. But when you knew the truth, you acted. Don't blame yourself for the past. Build a better future." Elena's words echoed in Michael's mind for days. He realized he had a second chance, not only with Gabriel, but with his own life. He began to reevaluate his priorities, to understand that all the money in the world meant nothing if he had no one to truly share it with. The case against Vanessa dragged on for months, as she had predicted. Her lawyers tried everything, from questioning the validity of the evidence to claiming she herself had been deceived by someone who had tampered with the beanie. But the evidence was too solid. Emails, phone calls recorded by the police after Elena's testimony, Gabriel's own wounds, everything pointed to an inescapable truth. In the end, Vanessa accepted a plea deal. She would be permanently barred from contacting Gabriel, would lose all rights to the family fortune, and would have to complete community service in addition to being monitored for years. It wasn't prison, but it was justice, as much as was possible. Gabriel, shielded from all the sordid details of the case, simply knew that Vanessa was gone and would not be coming back. In the first few days, he still had nightmares, waking up scared and looking for the beanie. But with proper therapy, genuine love, and the constant presence of his father and the affection of Elena, he began to recover. 6 months after the day Elena first saw the wounds, Gabriel returned to school. He was thinner than he should have been, shyer than most 7-year-olds, but he was alive, he was healthy, he was happy. Michael took him personally on the first day, holding his hand as they walked to the classroom. Gabriel looked up at his father and smiled. That smile, so rare in recent months, lit up Michael's face like no multi-million-dollar contract ever had. "You'll be okay, son. You're brave, you're strong, and Dad is here if you need anything." "I know, Dad. I know." As he watched Gabriel enter the classroom and be greeted by his classmates, Michael felt Elena at his side. She had insisted on coming too, wanting to make sure Gabriel was truly okay. "Thank you, Elena, for everything. You saved my son. You saved my family. You saved me." Elena smiled, that tranquil smile of someone who knows they did the right thing. "I only did what any person with a heart would do, sir. I listened, I saw, and I acted. Sometimes that's all we need, to truly look, to truly touch, to truly care." Michael agreed. He had learned the most important lesson of his life. Power, money, influence, none of it meant a thing without humanity, without compassion, without genuine love. That night at home, Michael had dinner with Gabriel and Elena in the kitchen, without formalities, without staff serving them, just three people who had become an unlikely but real family. Gabriel chattered excitedly about his first day of school, about the friends he had made, about the cool teacher he had. Later, at bedtime, Michael lay beside his son reading a children's story with funny voices that made Gabriel laugh. When the boy finally fell, asleep, relaxed and serene, Michael stayed there for a few more minutes just watching. The scars on Gabriel's head were already almost invisible. In a few months, there would be no physical mark of what he had suffered. The emotional scars would take longer to heal, but with love, patience, and proper support, they too would fade. Michael left the room and found Eleanor making tea in the kitchen. She had a small altar in her studio apartment, with herbs, stones, and images of the ancestral spirits she revered. Every night, she said her prayers in her native language, giving thanks for another day. Michael joined her in the kitchen. "Eleanor, I've been thinking. I want to create a foundation, something to help other children like Gabriel, children suffering from conditions that traditional medicine can't diagnose. I want to integrate medical knowledge with traditional wisdom, and I'd like you to lead it." Elena looked at him, surprised. "Sir, I don't have the training for that. You have something better. You have heart, you have intuition, you have knowledge passed down through generations, and you have the courage to do what's right, even when everyone says you're wrong. You're exactly the person we need." Elena thought for a moment, then smiled. "It would be an honor, Mr. Anderson. My grandmother always said that knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. If we can help other children, other families, then yes, I'll accept." And so the Gabriel Institute was born, an organization dedicated to humanize diagnostics, combining modern medicine with traditional indigenous practices. It became a national reference, helping hundreds of children whose conditions were neglected or misdiagnosed by the traditional system. Gabriel grew up knowing his story, knowing what had happened, but also knowing he had been saved. Not by advanced technology, not by renowned doctors, but by a humble woman who cared enough to look beyond the obvious. Years later, when he was 17, Gabriel gave a speech at the institute that bore his name. He spoke about the importance of listening to patients, of touching, of caring with humanity. And when he finished, he hugged Elena, who was in the audience with tears in her eyes. "You saved me, Auntie Elena. You gave me a second chance at life." Elena hugged him back, this boy who had grown into a strong, healthy young man. "No, my son, you saved yourself, by being brave enough to survive. I just helped you find the way." Michael, beside them, watched with pride. He had lost years of his son's life by focusing on the wrong things. But now, seeing Gabriel strong, healthy, happy, he knew he had made peace with the past. True wealth wasn't in the buildings he built, the contracts he signed, the bank accounts he maintained. It was right there, in that hug, in that love, in that genuine connection between people who cared for one another. And all of it because of a woman who had the courage to see what no one else saw, to touch where no one else dared, to fight when everyone said to give up. The story of Gabriel, Michael, and Elena was just beginning to unfold into a future full of possibilities. 5 years had passed since the day the truth was revealed. Gabriel was now 12 and in the 7th grade. He was a lean boy with messy brown hair and expressive eyes that held a maturity unusual for his age. The scars on his head were invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look, but he touched them occasionally like someone stroking a distant memory. The townhouse on the Upper East Side had changed completely. Michael had sold that cold property, full of painful memories, and moved with Gabriel to a smaller house in Park Slope, Brooklyn, a warmer, less ostentatious neighborhood. It was a 2-story house with a real backyard, where Gabriel planted vegetables with Elena and played catch with his dad on weekends. Elena no longer lived in the house as a housekeeper. She had her own apartment 2 blocks away, but spent every day with the family, now as the executive director of the Gabriel Institute. The foundation had grown beyond any initial expectations. It occupied an entire building in Williamsburg, with equipped medical offices, therapy rooms, spaces for traditional indigenous healing practices, and even a small medicinal herb garden on the roof. The Institute provided free care to over 300 children a month, all with conditions that conventional medicine had failed to diagnose or treat properly. The team was made up of doctors, nurses, and psychologists, but also indigenous healers, spiritual guides, specialists in Chinese medicine, and other ancestral practices. It was a bridge between 2 worlds that had, for so long, ignored each other. That Thursday afternoon, Gabriel was at the Institute doing his weekly volunteer work. Since he was 10, he had asked his father for permission to help, to be near the children who were going through what he had gone through. Michael had hesitated at first, worried it might bring back traumatic memories, but Eleanor had convinced him otherwise. Gabriel needs to reframe what happened to him. He needs to turn pain into purpose, she had said. And she was right. Gabriel thrived when he was at the Institute. He talked to the younger children, told them stories, made them laugh. He had a special way of making them feel safe, understood. Often it was the children who wouldn't speak to anyone else who opened up to him. That particular afternoon, a new patient had arrived. A 5-year-old girl named Sophia, who had been suffering from inexplicable abdominal pain for over a year. Her parents, a young couple from Queens, were desperate. They had been to 3 different hospitals and had dozens of tests, all inconclusive. The doctors said it was psychosomatic, that the girl needed psychological counseling. Gabriel watched from a distance as Elena examined Sophia with her gentle, experienced touch. The girl was scared, huddled in her mother's lap. Elena spoke softly in English, then in her Navajo language, as if she was singing. Sophia gradually began to relax. "Can I come closer?" Gabriel asked, looking at Elena. She nodded. Gabriel approached and sat on the floor next to the chair where Sophia was. "Hi, Sophia. My name is Gabriel. Do you like to draw?" The girl looked at him with big, curious eyes, then nodded. Gabriel took some paper and colored pencils from a nearby drawer. "Want to draw together? You draw what you're feeling and I'll draw what I used to feel when I was little like you." As they drew side by side, Eleanor continued her examination. She gently touched Sophia's belly, pressed specific points, and observed her reactions. At one point, the girl flinched and cried softly. Eleanor stopped immediately and stroked her hair. "Does it hurt here, sweetie?" Sophia nodded. Eleanor exchanged a meaningful look with the pediatrician on the case, Dr. Ramirez, a young, open-minded professional who had joined the Institute's team the previous year. "I need to do a different kind of ultrasound," Eleanor told the parents. "Something more detailed. There's a pattern to the pain that I recognize, but I need to be sure." 2 hours later, the ultrasound revealed what Elena had suspected. Sophia had a rare condition called intestinal duplication, a congenital malformation where an extra portion of the intestine develops abnormally. It was something conventional scans often missed because they didn't know exactly where to look. But Eleanor, with her knowledge of pain patterns and her accumulated experience from years of observation, had identified the signs. Sophia would have surgery the following week at a partner hospital, with all expenses covered by an emergency fund Michael maintained. The surgery would be simple, the recovery quick. This little girl who had spent a year suffering without answers would finally get her life back. Sophia's parents cried with relief and gratitude. Gabriel, who had stayed with the girl all afternoon, said goodbye with a drawing they had made together, a colourful butterfly. "When you get better, you'll be able to fly like this butterfly," he said, smiling. That evening, in the house in Park Slope, Michael was making dinner while Gabriel did his homework at the kitchen table. It was a scene of simple domesticity that, 5 years ago, would have been unthinkable. Michael Anderson, the real estate magnate, cooking homemade pasta and helping his son with math problems. The company still existed, still profitable, but Michael had delegated the day-to-day management to competent partners. He remained chairman, participated in strategic decisions, but his priorities had drastically changed. Work was work. Family was life. "Dad, can I ask you a question?" Gabriel said, putting down his pencil. "Of course, son. You can ask me anything. Do you still think about her, about Vanessa?" Michael stopped stirring the sauce, the question catching him by surprise. They had talked about Vanessa a few times over the years, whenever Gabriel felt the need, but the subject hadn't come up lately. "Sometimes I do," Michael admitted. "Not with anger, not anymore. I just wonder how someone can bring themselves to do what she did." "My therapist said that sometimes people hurt others because they're hurt inside themselves," Gabriel said, repeating something he had learned in therapy. "That's true. It doesn't excuse it, but it helps explain it. Vanessa grew up in poverty, fought hard to get out. When she met our world, I think she became obsessed with never going back to where she came from, and that obsession turned her into something she probably never wanted to be. Do you think she's sorry?" Michael thought for a long moment. "I hope so. I hope that somewhere she's found peace and repentance. But that's not our problem anymore. We've moved on." Gabriel nodded, returning to his math homework. Michael watched his son, this boy who had survived so much and was now a normal kid with normal worries, normal dreams. It was a quiet miracle. The doorbell rang. It was Eleanor, who had gone home to change but was back for dinner as she did most nights. She came in carrying a tray of homemade brownies she had made especially for Gabriel. "How's my little healer?" she said, ruffling the boy's hair. "Auntie Eleanor, I told you I'm not little anymore. I've grown up. You'll always be little to me. That's the privilege of someone who watched you grow." They had dinner together, talking about the day's cases at the Institute, about Gabriel's school, about a new project Michael was developing to build sustainable low-income housing. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by laughter and the easy camaraderie of people who knew each other deeply. After dinner, Gabriel went up to his room, and Elena and Michael sat on the porch drinking tea and watching the city lights. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much life has changed," Michael said. "If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be here, cooking dinner, helping with homework, running a medical foundation, I would have said they were crazy." "Life has a way of redirecting us when we need it," Elena replied. "You just needed a push to wake up." "It was more than a push. It was you saving my son, saving me." Elena smiled, that tranquil smile that radiated wisdom. "Michael, do you remember what I told you that day? That you shouldn't blame yourself for the past, but build a better future." "I remember every word." "Then look around you. Look at what you've built. A happy, healthy son. A foundation that saves lives. A home filled with love. You did that. Not me. I just turned on the light. You were the one who chose to walk toward it." Michael felt his eyes well up. Eleanor had a way of getting straight to the point, of saying exactly what he needed to hear. The following weekend, the Gabriel Institute hosted a special event. It was the Foundation's 5th anniversary. Dozens of families who had been treated came to celebrate. There were children running through the garden, parents chatting, indigenous healers demonstrating their practices, doctors explaining success stories. Gabriel was at the center of it all, surrounded by younger children who adored him. He told stories, organized games, always with that gentle smile that won everyone over. Michael watched him from a distance, talking with donors and partners, but always keeping one eye on his son. At one point, a journalist from a major New York newspaper approached Michael. She was doing a story on the Institute. "Mr. Anderson, your foundation has impressive results. Children that no one could help are finding cures here. What's the secret?" Michael thought about the question. It's not a secret. It's a matter of truly listening. Modern medicine is wonderful, but sometimes it forgets the most basic thing. The patient is a person, not a set of symptoms. When you combine technology with humanity, with ancestral knowledge, with genuine attention, the results appear. And what motivated you to create all this? Michael looked over at Gabriel, who, at that moment, was helping a small child who had fallen and scraped their knee. "My son, he taught me that true wealth isn't in what you have, but in who you love and who you help." The story came out a week later, taking up 2 full pages. The main photo showed Gabriel smiling next to one of the children treated by the Institute. The headline read, "When Love Heals, the story of a boy who turned pain into hope." Gabriel read the article with curiosity, but without much fanfare. To him, this was just normal life. He didn't see himself as a hero or a symbol. He was just a boy who had suffered, survived, and now wanted to help others do the same. One night, Gabriel had a nightmare. It hadn't happened in months, but every now and then, the memories returned. He woke up scared, sweaty, calling for his dad. Michael came running, as he always did, and sat on the bed beside his son. "Was it the dream again?" he asked gently. Gabriel nodded, still trembling. "Dad, sometimes I still get scared. Scared that it will happen again, that someone will hurt me again," Michael hugged his son. "I know, Gabriel, and it's okay to be scared. What happened to you was terrible. But look at you now. You survived. You're strong. And most importantly, you're not alone. You will never be alone again." "I know, but sometimes my head forgets and the fear comes back. Then when the fear comes back, you call me, or you call Auntie Eleanor, or you talk to your therapist. You don't have to carry this alone." Gabriel snuggled into his father's embrace. "Thanks, Dad, for always being here." "Always, son. Always." Michael stayed there until Gabriel fell asleep. Again, he watched his son in his peaceful slumber, his hands relaxed, his breathing soft. He thought about everything they had been through, how they had almost lost each other, how life had given them a second chance. And he thought of Elena, the woman who had entered their lives as a housekeeper and become their savior. She could have ignored it. She could have just kept doing her job, keeping her head down, not getting involved. But she chose to see, chose to act, chose to risk everything for a child she barely knew. It was that kind of courage that the Institute tried to replicate. Not just medical or technical courage, but human courage, the courage to care, the courage to challenge the status quo, the courage to say something is wrong when everyone else says it's fine. In the years that followed, Gabriel continued to grow, continued to help at the Institute, continued to be that soft light that illuminated everyone around him. When he was 15, he gave his first public speech about his story. He spoke without shame, without resentment, just with the raw honesty of someone who had lived through something terrible and chosen to turn it into something good. The audience, composed of doctors, medical students, traditional healers, and families affected by rare diseases, listened in absolute silence. When he finished, the ovation was emotional and prolonged. Elena was in the front row, tears streaming freely down her face. Michael was beside her, equally moved. This boy they had almost lost, who had almost been destroyed by human cruelty, had become an extraordinary young man. Not in spite of what he suffered, but perhaps in a way because of it. He had learned from a young age that life is fragile, that people can be cruel, but they can also be extraordinarily kind. And he had chosen to be kind. He had chosen to be a light. Years later, when Gabriel was in medical school, he decided to specialize in integrative pediatrics. He wanted to continue the work that Eleanor had started, that the Institute had expanded. He wanted to be the bridge between scientific knowledge and ancestral wisdom. Eleanor, older now but still vibrant and active, continued to run the Institute. Michael, now with completely white hair, divided his time between the company, the institute, and the grandchildren Gabriel would eventually give him. The townhouse on the Upper East Side, where it all happened, was demolished years ago. In its place, they built a public park with a playground and green space. No one playing there knew the dark history of that land, and maybe it was better that way. Some stories need to be transformed, reframed, replaced by something more luminous. Gabriel's story was one of those. A story of pain, yes, but more importantly, a story of healing, of love, of courage. A story that proved that sometimes the answer isn't in the obvious places. Sometimes it's in the calloused hands of a humble woman. Sometimes it's in the heart of a father who finally woke up. Sometimes it's in the resilience of a child who refused to be broken. And all those stories together formed something greater. They formed a legacy. They formed hope. They formed the proof that even in the darkest of situations, light can prevail. Elena, the invisible housekeeper who became the hero of an entire family. Elena, who proved that sometimes healing doesn't come from expensive hospitals or sophisticated drugs, but simply from someone who cares enough to truly look, truly listen, truly care. And Gabriel, the boy who was almost destroyed by greed, became a symbol of hope, of resilience, of the fact that love always wins in the end. The townhouse that was once a stage for silent suffering was now just a distant memory. In its place, a new story was written every day. A story of three people who found each other at the right time, who chose love over fear, who chose action over indifference. And every night when the lights went out, these three people slept in peace, knowing they had found something rare in this world, a family, built not by blood or money, but by choice, courage, and unconditional love. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Gabriel, Michael, and Elena has touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of pain, resilience, and true love, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what struck you the most. Was it Elena's courage? Michael's transformation? Gabriel's resilience? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, stories that reveal the deepest side of the human soul and make us reflect on what truly matters in life. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you see the world in a different way.